Chris, how are we looking for our attendance on the board members?
Chris, you're on mute.
No, I see. So I have everybody that we're expecting. I just don't see Ms. Paulson Alvarez. Is she present? Oh, she just came in. So that's everybody, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so we'll call the meeting to order. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2020 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Moreover, in order to comply with the national, state, and state declarations of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the municipal land use law, the Open Public Meeting Act, and the recent operational documents from the New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, this meeting is being held virtually as a web-based platform with remote public access. Mr. Weber, Steve, you wanted to say something with regard to the process this evening before we go into the Pledge of Allegiance, Mr. Warner?
Certainly, but just right now, Mr. Chairman, thank you. With respect to the notice, just also to further amplify the record and supplement the record, this is also a special meeting that was properly noticed well more than 48 hours in advance in two newspapers published. The Union County Local Source and the Star Ledger. Was also announced at the last hearing date that this would be a special meeting this evening. It's also my understanding, and we have proofs of publication from those respective newspapers. Also, it's been posted on the door in City Hall, as well as on the website in addition. So all in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act and Municipal Land Use Law for the conduct of special meetings. That's all I had at this point, Mr. Chairman. I'll have more when we get to our first application with respect to procedure.
All right, we'll proceed to the Pledge of Allegiance. If you notice in my photograph behind me, there is an American flag up there. So that's what we'll be using to salute tonight. So we're going to begin the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, well, thank you all very much. Mr. Secretary, could you go through the roll call?
Certainly, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Anderson?
Present.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff? Vice Chairman
You're on mute, Jay. Jay's on mute. We can see him.
Here.
Thank you.
Councilmember Little?
Present.
Ms. Paulson Alvarez?
Here.
Mr. Drummond is excused. Ms. McNeil?
Present.
Mr. Delory?
Here.
Mr. Zucker, we're expecting he will be a little bit late. Mr. Perella?
Here.
Mr. Fiore?
Here.
Mr. Formicelli?
Here.
And for the record, Steve Warner's here. He's our board attorney. You have a quorum. You can proceed.
Did you get Miss McNeil, or did I miss that?
Yes, I did call Ms. McNeil, but I
Okay,
can't.
great.
I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, great. Thanks, Ione. Okay, great. Well, we have first thing on the agenda here is meeting minutes from our last meeting. Did a good job putting these minutes together, given the length of the meeting. Does anyone on the board have any comments, questions, or additions, deletions to the minutes from last month's meeting?
Mr. Chairman, I do. Comments on the brewery were left over from, and they don't reflect what we talked about in terms of the size of the breweries, et cetera, in the downtown area.
Chris, I know I don't think Tom is on here. I know that Joe is, but that's something we did resolve at the subcommittee level this past week. So maybe we need to revisit that and sharpen those up. So given that Tom's not here today, Andy, let's just go ahead and assume that we need to revise that and present it again at the next meeting to make sure we got it exactly right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other comments with regard to the meeting minutes? All right, hearing none, can I have a motion to approve?
As
So
a-
moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, so they're approved, subject to getting the breweries in the CRBD paragraph correct. And Tom Behrens will take care of that and contact all of us with a revised meeting minutes. All right.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but did I miss the vote? I heard the motion in the second. I didn't hear
Yeah,
the
Missed
vote.
voice vote, So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Okay.
Seeing
Thank you.
none.
There goes that board attorney again. My apologies.
No, thank you, Mr. Warner. Mr. Warner, you want to just walk us through the next two public hearings here, the fact that they're being carried?
Yes, that's my understanding, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. And Chris, you can correct me where I'm wrong, but the first Cardone Contracting, Inc., 83 Maple Street has requested to be carried. They are being carried with further notice. So there will be further notice, but right now they're being carried with further notice to October 26th, Chris,
Yes, that's correct.
at 7:30 PM. The assumption is we will again be virtual remote in this fashion as the location for that continuation of that hearing. And it's my understanding they provided in writing a time to act through at least the end of October, correct, Chris?
Yes, they waived the time for the board to render a decision.
Okay, so if you're here on that matter will not be heard tonight. And it's going to be deja vu all over again when I say that the exact same thing for Beechwood at Summit LLC, item 6B on the agenda, 43 Woodland Avenue, also has requested to be carried. They are also being carried with further notice to October 26th at 7:30. The assumption being that the location will again be the virtual remote web-based platform we are utilizing this evening. And they also extended the time to act through at least the end of October, may have waived same in writing, correct, Chris?
Yes, that's also correct.
Okay, thank you. So that Beechwood at Summit LLC, 43 Woodland Avenue, that also will not be heard tonight. That brings us to item 6C, and I'm going to hand it back off to our chairman.
All right, thanks, Mr. Warner. Mr. Giannetti, good evening. How are you?
Good evening, Chairman.
Good evening to all the members of the public that are here tonight. I just thought it might be a good idea to sort of just kind of go through some of the ground rules that we did last time, because I imagine there are some members of the public here tonight that may not have been here at the last meeting. And so the process that we would normally go through, at least in our Zoom calls at this point, is to have Mr. Giannetti and his consultants present sort of discipline by discipline, civil engineers, architects, planners, traffic engineers, any in those sorts of order. And in speaking with Mr. Warner, the way we have to run this is that after each of these consultants speaks, the board members have an opportunity to ask that particular witness questions. And immediately following that, the public has an opportunity to ask questions of that individual consultant and or expert. And those questions from the audience's perspective, from the public's perspective, need to be directed at the testimony at that time. So whatever the civil engineer says, please direct your questions to those parts of his testimony. And in the case of the architect and planner and traffic specifically as well. We'll go through that same process. When Mr. Giannetti is complete and presented his case, we will then open it up to the public for comments, thoughts, ideas, questions, any presentation that the public may wish to make with their consultants or engineers, et cetera, can be done after Mr. Giannetti and the applicant has completed their case. And so I think that's relatively clear at this point. Anybody have any questions on the process that we are going to be going through? And we'll Chris and I and Mr. Warner will try to keep everyone sort of headed in the right direction. It gets complicated as we call on members of the public. Our board secretary, Chris Nicole, is very good at this. He scans the audience looking for people who wish to have comments. You can either raise your hand or click on your screen there indicating you have a comment, and he will call on you one by one so that we can sort of keep order, and we'll take as many questions as the public has. So with regard to the schedule tonight, we're roughly 7:30. What we'd like to do is see if we can have sort of a hardish stop at 9:30 or 10 tonight. I know this is a lot of information that comes forward. The board does have other business to conduct tonight, so it would be helpful. We also have a court reporter, so after about 90 minutes, we'll probably take a break and have the court reporter give her a little bit of a break, give all of us a little bit of break, and then reconvene after that. And I think,
Mr. Chairman, I
Chris-
do have a few predicate items to cover with your
Great.
permission.
okay, and Ms. Chris Nicola, did I leave anything out with regard to the process and your handling, moving people in and out of Zoom?
No, I think you hit it all on the head there. I would ask the public as well, if you click the reactions button too, you can attract attention. You can raise a hand that way as well.
Yep.
If you don't know what you're doing with that, that's okay. You can try and raise your hand on the
Hey, you
screen.
can raise your hand. Yep.
Find you, you know.
Okay, and so.
And I
Mr.
think
Warren-
one more too, Chairman, 'cause I think there was some of it last time that the public should not use the chat feature.
Oh,
And
yeah.
if there's a question or public comment, I guess they can do it at the appropriate time when it's, identified for public comment or question.
Mhm.
All right, Mr. Warner, you have a couple of items to go over, and then I have one request of Mr. Giannetti when you're finished with that.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Again, for the record, on this Primrose School Franchising Company, 480 and 490 Morris Avenue is the case we're hearing now. The board member Drummond, who is not here this evening and is excused, nevertheless is recused from the matter. So as we stated last time, so I want the record to continue to reflect that. Also, to reiterate for the record that the notice that was provided for the original hearing, August 24th, as I stated on that evening, was sufficient as to content and timely served. And the matter was properly carried from August 24 to September 23 this evening without further notice. And we have in writing a time to act waiver from the applicant so that we can proceed this evening as well. One of the issues that we should address is ex parte communications. I mentioned this the last time. Regrettably, I have to mention it again and reinforce it again because it is an important part of the process, and it appears as if individuals are sending ex parte communications to the board or individual board members, notwithstanding my explanation last time. Let me be clear. We are, as a planning board, a quasi-judicial body. We operate not unlike a court, and the board members are not unlike judges. They are serving in a quasi-judicial capacity. No one can hear the case or consider evidence outside of a properly noticed public meeting, and within that properly noticed public meeting under the Open Public Meetings Act, the Sunshine Law, we can only consider evidence during a properly noticed, under the Municipal Land Use Law, hearing, which we have just begun. Again, or I should say we're continuing the hearing on Primrose. This is the only time we can board members can consider evidence. Board members cannot consider letters of objection. They cannot consider petitions from members of the public for or against an application. Why? Because that is evidence and it has to be submitted under oath by an individual who is testifying with personal knowledge during the properly noticed hearing, which would include tonight. The law precludes the board members from considering that information. There is case law, the Siebert case, 174 NJ Super 548, Law Division 1980, and the Exxon case versus Bernardsville Board of Adjustment, 196 NJ Super, 183 Law Division 1984. The courts have made it clear that members of planning and zoning boards cannot consider letters of objection, petitions, or the like. They can only consider evidence under oath when presented during the public hearing within a properly noticed public meeting. I apologize for sounding a bit draconian but on that, but that is the law. So I want all the members of the public to understand it's not that the board members don't want to consider everything they do. They can only consider it when it's properly produced in front of them during a hearing, so that each side has the right to confront witnesses and has due process, which are fundamental principles under our New Jersey state and our US federal constitution. So I hope everyone understands that. That said, all members of the public are free to introduce any relevant evidence whatsoever, including documents, including letters during the hearing, including tonight. And you can testify as to anything relevant, and you can have experts testify. You can have attorneys represent you if you wish. All those things are available, just can't happen outside of the hearing. As far as a general procedure, I touched on one issue that members of the public certainly can be represented by counsel should they so desire. I can't help but notice on the screen an attorney, a land use attorney who I'm familiar with. But let me ask the general question. Are there any attorneys here this evening representing any parties other than the applicant? And the reason I ask is because if there are, then those members of the public who are represented by that attorney cannot themselves cross-examine witnesses, only the attorney can. That's another one of those rules under the municipal land use law. So do we have any attorneys representing any parties other than the applicant this evening? Seeing and hearing none, including the individual who I know is a land use lawyer might be here for another reason. I'll assume that's the case. That's fine. Then all the members of the public can themselves question witnesses. Also, if you have an expert, whether you're represented by counsel or not, members of the public, if you have an expert, a traffic engineer, an architect, what have you, those witnesses can testify along with you individual members of the public after, as the chairman said earlier, after the applicant finishes their case. So the applicant will present each witness, board members, then board professionals, then members of the public can question each witness. After all the witnesses from the applicant are completed and the applicant rests their direct case, so to speak, then members of the public present their cases in favor of or against the application and can present any expert witnesses at that time. Expert witnesses under the law are not allowed to question. If members of the public have an expert, you cannot utilize that expert to question the applicant's experts. You have to do that individually, or if you have an attorney, through your attorney. The reason is that technically constitutes the unauthorized practice of law by an expert who is not an attorney. They can't cross-examine witnesses during a land use board application. So I just want to make all those rules clear in the event that members of the public have expert witnesses that they would like to testify. They can, but they can't question witnesses. I've gone on a long time teaching the Land Use Board 101 procedures course. I apologize for being so long in doing it, but I hope everyone understands the process, and whether you like or don't like the process, it's the process the law requires us to follow. So we will, of course, follow that process. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Anderson, given what Mr. Warner just said, that nobody can provide testimony or ask questions outside of the hearing, I think it's improper and unfair to limit the comments from the audience, because there are a lot of people here for whom this is a very important matter and they should be allowed to speak.
Mr. Baumann, if I may, Mr. Chairman, I don't believe anybody's limiting anybody's public comments, correct?
Mr.
Chairman?
Mr. Warner, I think I have a fairly discreet point to make on this.
Yeah,
Apparently,
actually, Mr. Sir,
Yes.
the chair controls the meeting and we'll defer back to the chair. The chair controls the meeting.
He set a time limit, and that means that not everybody may be able to talk.
Well,
It's an
Mr. Bassman, what was likely going to happen tonight, we think, is that this case will go beyond tonight, given all the folks that we have on in the Zoom call, and to get to everyone in proper order, the applicant presenting a witness and then having the questions from both the board's professionals, and the various members of the public. We're sort of projecting, Mr. Warner and I are kind of projecting that this will go on for a third night. We don't have any intention of not letting anyone from the public speak. Anyone who wants to speak can. The only thing I would ask is that if someone prior to you had made the same point you've made, maybe you could not raise that point. However, if you feel that your point is different or has some slightly different aspect to it, please feel free to speak. We're not going to limit anybody, and it will take as long as it takes to get everybody's comments in. So that wasn't our intent to indicate that we were going to cut you off.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr.
Yes.
may I
Anderson,
make, this is Michael Ennis. I live at 23 Webster Avenue.
Only one at a time. You have to be recognized by the chairman
All right,
before
Mr.
you
Ennis,
speak.
yes.
The point I want to make on this is there are apparently folks who are trying to enter the Zoom and are being told that they cannot enter the Zoom because we've reached the maximum capacity.
Is that
So in
right?
terms of the due process comments that Mr. Warner so eloquently put forth, and towards the comments of the others on the call that
Huh.
everyone should get the chance to be heard, there are folks that are right now cannot be in this hearing.
We understand the point. That's a legal issue, Mr. Ennis. Thank you for making us aware of that. Chris, do we have a
How do we
100
intend to deal
person?
with that legal
Mr.
issue?
Ennis, I'm not done. Chris, do we have, I'm addressing the point that of information you just raised. Chris, do we have a 100%, 100 person capacity on our Zoom capabilities? We don't have beyond that?
Well, it appears at this point that we have 100 in here, and I have
Wow.
just received correspondence that we are having trouble. So I don't know if you want to take a recess to figure this out or how we want to proceed here, but
Do we know whether we have a 100 person? It's somewhat coincidental, so I suspect we do have a 100 person capacity, but is that the issue?
yeah, it appears to be that at this point. So
Do we have someone technologically that we can address this with?
I'm going
at
to
the
try.
city?
I can try and sort this out now, but I would.
And I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, Mr. Lemio?
Yeah.
You look like you had something you wanted to say.
yes, it was the same thing. We've been contacted by at least 10 to 20 people who are have been trying to access now for the last 25 minutes of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if they're gonna, anyway, we would have to get the word out to them that capacity has been increased and they can now join.
Okay.
Right, well, let's
Let us-
hold that for now, Mr. Chairman, if we may.
Yeah.
Might I ask applicants' counsel, because the applicant, before we make a determination as to if and how we're going to proceed, applicants' counsel should have an opportunity to weigh in, because frankly, applicants' counsel, I would expect, has an interest in not proceeding if there's a due process issue to be, or concern. So with
Yeah,
with your
thank you.
permission, Mr. Chairman, can Mr. Giannetti?
Sure, yeah, please, Mr. Giannetti, yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, and Mr. Warner. I don't have a problem taking a recess to understand what capacity limits the town has on its Zoom and whatever mechanism there can be to increase that. And I guess also the question is, does that apply to phone calls? Are people able to call in? Or is it just, is it 100 videos, or is it,
No,
and that's
a good
more for the
question.
IT person?
Yeah, and Chris, maybe you could find that out, and then if there is, I assume people can telephone into you with questions, but I don't know if they can hear the proceedings. I suspect by telephone they can't see the proceedings. Maybe we could get the factual information before.
Well, I think this is
we
streaming
make some
live on you.
determinations.
I believe this is streaming live on YouTube. So if they want to, and maybe, I'm not an expert in this, but if, you know, if we can figure out how it's streaming live on YouTube, so they have a way to see it and hear it. If there's not a way for them to participate on Zoom, then maybe if there's a way to call into something else to pose a question, as long as they are still able to view the hearing on YouTube.
And I will share, Mr. Chairman, the fact that many municipalities are utilizing something similar to either a television channel, do we still call it television? And or YouTube or live streaming and the like, along with a telephonic component as satisfactorily allowing participation. So that might be a solution that's already available to the board.
And if I may, just one more, I made the request at the last meeting, and maybe it makes even further sense now. If you recall, at the last meeting, I requested to allow for all of our witnesses to testify before all of our witnesses then get opened up to public questioning. So when someone comes up with a question, whether it's traffic, whether it's operations, whether it's architecture, they can ask it and the appropriate witness can deal with it. From my perspective, especially when you have over 100 participants, that makes sense, because if you recall at the last meeting, we've got repeated questions despite the direction of the chairman and Mr. Warner on traffic, when we said we have a traffic witness that will come and testify. And not that I'm saying it was necessarily done on purpose, but it just has the effect of slowing the process down. If there's an issue with people being able to get on to speak or communicate, well, that even further, we can, again, they can view it on YouTube. We can present our case with our witnesses, whatever questions they have, they can write down. And then obviously it looks like this will probably go to an additional meeting. And therefore, when we come to the additional meeting, we will have all our witnesses available, and whatever question the public may have, whether it's traffic, operations, or whatnot, they don't have to come up several different times. They can ask all their questions, and we'll have all our witnesses available to answer.
Mr. Warner, we talked about this a little bit earlier this evening. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, while it's ultimately the discretion of the chair as to how to proceed, there's no law requiring it to be done that way or to be done a different way. In my experience, particularly with a complicated case, it's difficult for members of the public to have to remember all the testimony in all the different areas of expertise, 4 or 5 different witnesses, and at the end ask all the questions of the various different witnesses. It also takes away the proximity of someone cross-examining an expert witness somewhat contemporaneous with the testimony that they're providing. So frankly, it's not my recommendation that it be done the way Mr. Giannetti is requesting, but certainly the chair has the discretion and would not be wrong to do it that way or do it the individual witness way that I would recommend.
Well, Mr. Giannetti, we actually had this conversation earlier tonight as given we thought we would have, you know, a pretty substantial turnout by the public. And as much as I hate to say it, I think we probably need to go witness by witness. And I think that's the safer way for all of us. So Mr. Nicola, what are we doing relative to our technical questions at this point?
I've reached out to somebody in IT to try and get a solution with this. I need a couple of minutes to see if this is something that's feasible.
So should we take a break here, Mr. Warner, for 15 minutes?
Before we do, quick question, Chris, do we have a telephonic direction in our notice and on the agenda for people to call a telephone number?
I can, let me announce the number as well.
Well, who's fielding that call or those calls?
Well, the agenda directs them to call 273-6407, which I'm right next to that phone line as well.
So you will be the one fielding all the telephone calls from those who wish to speak, who cannot speak on Zoom through a mic, correct?
That would be correct.
As far as we know, there's no limitation to the number of calls that can come in, or how does that work?
That's true. And you're just going to have to field them one after the other as they come in from people presumably who are watching on YouTube, if that is the video availability to those who don't have Zoom.
If I can make one comment on that the notice you put out? Mr. Warner, is that possible?
I don't know who's speaking. I don't have everybody on.
This is
I
Michael.
don't have the
Ellis,
capacity
YT.
for 99 at once. But you have to direct it to the chair.
Mr. Ennis, what's the question?
The question goes, I would just, I'm a practicing attorney. I would
Yeah.
encourage Mr. Warner to look at the agenda notice and to see whether or not that phone number is actually constitutes good notice to call in to participate in the meeting, or whether it's just a number to call to notify the board that this person cannot participate via Zoom.
No, I
and that's
understand
it.
that, but Mr. Nicola just announced the telephone number for those who wish to call in who are watching YouTube.
But
So
the
it's-
predicate
it's
would be that
sufficient.
you actually attended that YouTube meeting and you did not call in before, right?
But the agenda does contain the YouTube link.
Yes, and you're either watching on YouTube or you're on the Zoom meeting. If you're on the Zoom meeting, you don't have to call. If
But
you're watching on YouTube, you can hear the announcement to call that number.
But Mr. Anderson, does that
That's
mean
not,
that
that's not,
you?
that's not a
Hold on,
clear
hold on.
notice for that
Well,
procedure to take
Mr.
place.
Ennis, respectfully, you can make whatever arguments you wish to make at the appropriate time after a determination is made by the board if you feel
I
disgruntled.
don't want to waste anyone's time with the notice issue. That's the
I'm
problem.
sure the board
I'm sure there's gonna
appreciates
be a
that.
lot of time wasted.
Here's the
Yeah.
question I have. Mr. Ennis, are you representing yourself as a neighbor or are you trying to represent the neighborhood as a group? I'd like to know what your status is.
No, I'm here on my own, representing myself as a
Okay.
citizen,
As a resident.
as a resident.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Baseman, one question, and then we're going to take a break here and try to figure this out.
Okay, thank you. I'm glad you're going to do that. I want to know, is that telephone number capable of holding several phone calls? Or will people have to dial continuously and get busy signals before they can get hooked up and ask their question or make the testimony?
It's Mr. Nicola might be able to answer that question.
I will field every call as they come in, if that's how we have to proceed at this point, and I will communicate, the public's concerns to the chair and to the rest of the board for the public meeting. We are working to try and increase capacity at this point, so that's step one we're gonna try to do. We do need a little bit of time here, but
All right, so let's take a 15-minute break till 8:20. Enough time, Chris, you think? Check back in at 8:20?
yes, that would be great. I would note for the record too that Mr. Matthew Cohout and Cameron Evans currently have their hands raised as well, but
Let's get,
The questions, if the two people that have their hands raised, if it's anything other than what we've been discussing, we don't really need any more comments on our technical issue. Is there something in particular that you can add to this conversation? You want to recognize one or two of those, Chris?
between the two that sorry, I was sorting it out with IT. I missed it.
All right, let's just take our break here for 15 minutes. We'll reconvene and anyone who has a question can bring it up when we get back together. All right, thank you all.
Can you believe this?
That's
Okay. All right, we're going to reconvene here. It's 8:20, roughly 15 minutes after we said we were going to try to solve a technical problem. So I'll give people a little bit of time to come back on. I noticed that we had, scrolling through the people from the public, that Ruth Bader Ginsburg is with us tonight. So what a wonderful lady she was, Frances Felice. I'm not trying to make fun of it, but it's cute to see that you have that photograph up. She was a very special person.
May she rest in peace. May her memory be a blessing.
Yes. Okay, so everyone think we maybe have everybody back on here. A lot of people showing up. I see a lot of faces coming on, but there were a lot that were not, that didn't have their video on also. So, all right, so we have a technical problem we can't solve. We have more people than we have capacity for. One can increase capacity. It's not a matter of money. It's just a matter of getting it through the system. And, you know, it's 8 o'clock at night and there's nobody around to do that. It's not an insolvable technical problem. We just can't administratively solve that tonight. So we have, we're going to propose a special meeting for October 14th. That's a Wednesday night, a couple weeks from now. In the meantime, we'll be able to get all this resolved. I understand we can get up to the next level up to 300, which I believe that should be enough for us. So Mr. Giannetti, I know this is not what you'd hope for. We were all surprised to see this level of participation. It's possible we could go to the 21st of October if the 14th doesn't work for you and your team. But, and we also have the actual next meeting is the 26th of October. We're trying to find a time that doesn't push you out a whole meeting. So we're saying the first time this body can reconvene is on the 14th of October, Wednesday night.
And Mr. Chairman, does it make sense to double check with our board members that we anticipate
Sure it does.
having?
Yes, absolutely. Good. Board members, please check in and let us know. If we have 8 people that have a conflict, that's not going to work for us.
Mr. Chairman, this is John Zucker. Actually, I have joined, so.
Mr. Zucker, good to see you.
Good to see you too, and that date's fine with me.
Okay, all right, good.
That date works.
How
for
did
me.
Mr. Zucker get in?
Well, we actually dropped down. We actually dropped down to 95 during our break. Some people dropped off, but we're worried
We're
that
back up to 100.
it'll
We're
come
back up to 100. Yeah.
We are now back up to 100. Okay, we're back up to 100. And Mr. Nicola says if we, you know, the phone line will get jammed up, which is a point, you know, some of the other folks, members of the public had raised that phone line has the potential of getting jammed up and becoming unworkable. So the last thing we want to do is disenfranchise anyone here from having comments and input. That's what the process is all about. So any other board members have problems with the 14th? Okay.
Mr. Burgess looks like he's trying to say something also.
Okay.
And at the moment, I have another meeting scheduled, but I noticed on our calendars that both Tom as well as Ed are not scheduled for a meeting that night, so they might pinch it for me.
Okay, all right. Okay. Franchise anyone here from having comments and input. That's what the process. Okay, that's an echo from my voice, it sounds like.
I'm sorry, your voice is breaking up.
Yeah, all right, so it looks like all the board members can do this, Mr. Giannetti. That's our proposal for tonight.
Sure, and I'm checking with my team, and if they're on, I sent them a message, but they can also confirm. The 14th works for me. There were just 2 points, I guess. Mr. Warner, when they noticed for the special meeting, just to avoid any issues, and I believe when it says live on YouTube, it means it's streaming right now on YouTube, or at least maybe a 5-second delay. The agenda in the notice says that it's being recorded and can be viewed the next day. Maybe just to be cautious, in addition to providing the Zoom link and the phone number, noting that the hearing will also be streamed live on YouTube, so people know there's another avenue live to view the meeting. And then I would just also ask Mr. Warner, you mentioned some of the ex parte communications. I was aware of a letter, but if there were any other ex parte communications, if I can receive copies of those, just so I understand what was sent to the board.
Well, and if I may, just to be clear, with the chairman's permission, nothing else was sent to the board. Those, all communications that, well, when I say sent to the board, any communication sent to the board or a board member was returned unconsidered with my advice to Chris, and Chris sometimes was the author of the response on behalf of the board, saying we cannot consider this ex parte communication, or we cannot forward it to the board members to consider. So all the board members have been instructed not to consider any ex parte communications.
We have a question from Ms. Guzzo.
Hi, yes. I just want to go on record, Mr. Chairman, stating that we did distribute close to 400 notices. We have 117 wet signatures opposing this. I sent that to Chris earlier today.
I'm going to interrupt. Mr. Chairman, that's inappropriate. That's illegal. You can't say that during the quasi judicial proceedings. It's illegal because it's, let me finish. This
is not illegal. It is not.
It's a
Chairman, if I may, just to control this meeting, which is typically when the public clearly has no respect for the process, what typically happens is that the host of the meeting is allowed to mute the entire public. And if they want to say something, they can raise their hand. They can't just be shouting out.
Yeah, that's correct.
It's convenient that you get to talk whenever you like.
No,
I'm a licensed professional.
Yeah, you know what, Mr. Chairman, can you take control of the meeting?
Yeah, all right.
please?
So at this point, what we're going to do is Chris, you'll have to mute everybody, and then we don't really have anything more to say here at this point. We're going to reschedule this meeting to the 14th. There's no testimony. There's nothing here other than that is going to happen. And all the comments and issues as it relates to others can be brought forward at that point. I don't think there's any reason for us to have any further conversation, if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Warner.
No, that's correct. I'll just advise the board to ignore any hearsay evidence, which includes petitions or statements of other people having positions when those people are not here to testify under oath. And if they are here to testify under oath, they have to do so individually, and each side has to have an opportunity to cross-examine and confront. And that way there's due process.
And I know this appears, it is a quasi, as Mr. Warner said, it's a quasi jurisdictional, quasi judicial process. And we have to follow those rules. That's what the state land use law tells us to do. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. So I can't recognize any more comments. Mr. Giannetti, how does it look like for the 14th?
We are good for the 14th, and we'll make it work.
So as far as everyone on the call here, thank you for being here tonight. We're sorry for the technical glitch. We will get this solved. And on October 14th, we will reconvene and go back through the process. Mr. Giannetti, if I could just have one suggestion, and that is perhaps maybe you could begin with your architect hadn't finished, as I recall.
Correct.
It was very helpful when we got to your architect for people to see the concept and the sort of bigger picture of things. And I think that solved a lot of those questions that sort of came during the process with the civil engineer. So maybe if that architect could kind of go back to the beginning and sort of recap so that some of the people coming new into the process can get the big picture. Just a suggestion. You can obviously do whatever you'd like, but it's a suggestion that I think could be helpful.
I appreciate it, Chairman.
For everybody.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, for the record, since we are noticing a special meeting, Mr. Nicola will take care of that notice on behalf of the board accordingly, the same way we did for this meeting. And I want to announce again for the benefit of the members of the public that the matter is being carried to a special meeting, which will be noticed by the board for October 14th, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m., anticipated to be the same virtual mechanism as the location, albeit with an enhanced capacity, as well as the YouTube will be referenced as well. and the dial-in information will be referenced as well as a backup. So with that notice, and then also Mr. Giannetti, you'll confirm that the board has at least until the end of the month of October, if not beyond that, as a time to act, correct?
Yeah, so you could send me whatever form or extension document you guys use to memorialize it.
Chris will send that. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
As far as the board is concerned, we do have other business to do tonight. We need to wrap up our transmission of the DRO to council. And so as far as the meeting, as it relates to this particular case, the Primrose School Franchising Company, that hearing is being continued, and we're going to move on with other board business at this point.
And Mr. Chairman, if I may, all the documents are available on the city website for review. So this may also provide people the opportunity to review all those documents ahead of time.
All right, thank you. And that is shown in the notice
Yes,
as well, indicated in the notice. And as it relates to the agenda for people that are still there, if you go and look at the agenda that came out and you click on the item that says where the, what does that say, Chris, whatever on your agenda?
Document, and it will pull you to the planning board page where you can review all of the documents, even the exhibits as well are up there.
Yeah, okay, good.
In advance.
Thanks for bringing that up, Matt. Okay, so with regard to the DRO.
I'm sorry, I'm the court reporter. I just leave now, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, Ms. Lewis. We'll see you on the 14th.
Oh, don't count on it.
Well, anyway, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Bye.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Dewar. I'm going to sign off now too, if that's okay with you.
All right, sure. Mr. Burgess, I think we really don't need you, but if you could hang on for 5 minutes, I think we'll be done in 5 minutes. All right. So as you recall, in our last meeting, we spoke about the DRO and the board agreed to have the subcommittee get back together and to wrap up sort of all the details that we talked about that evening. I'm here to report that we have done that, that the DRO is essentially finished best as it can be at this point in time. And the members of our committee, of course, with Beth Little and Jay and myself, and of course, Tom Behrens and Krista. So in your packet, you received a letter of transmittal, which we would like you all to, I'm sure you have reviewed it prior to this, would like to have a vote on that so that the board officially is sending DRO on to the council and to through Rosemary Licadice. And Beth, anything you want to add to that at all?
I don't think so. It'll be introduced at the next council meeting, and then there will be an interim council meeting, and then it'll be heard at the first meeting in November. The hearing will be on the DRO.
All right, so we have, I don't know if we need to, I don't think we need to pull that up as an exhibit, Chris, right? Everybody has a copy of that, that letter, the transmittal letter. Really, all I'd like to ask you to do is to go through a vote and agree that we're ready to send this on to council.
Bill, I have a quick question. I know the minutes didn't reflect the breweries properly, but does what we talked about and agreed, is that reflected properly in what we're sending to the council?
Yeah, 3,000 square feet as the maximum 25% upfront. Yeah, visible from the street. Yeah,
Thank you.
That's correct. Yep. All right, Chris, maybe just take a quick roll call vote on whether we're prepared to send this.
We need a motion first.
All right, yes, okay, so I need a motion from someone.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All right,
Okay, Chairman Anderson,
yes.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Councilmember Little,
Yes.
Ms. Paulson Alvarez,
Sorry. Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Mr. Delory,
Yes.
Mr. Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Perrella,
Yes.
Well, thank you all very much. It was a tremendous effort on part of all members of the board, and I really appreciate everybody's patience and all the times that we read and reread it. I want to thank Joe. I want to thank you and Tom in particular. Tom was 27 years old when he started this. He's about 45 now. And he was 6'8" tall, and he's now only 5'2". So he's had a tough time, but he's done a great job. And Krista was absolutely incredible, very, very valuable. And Jay was very helpful to the process and has a much finer eye than I do in terms of seeing things and seeing the details. So it was very helpful. And Beth, thank you for keeping us on the straight and narrow and getting this headed towards council. So we're going to repeal and replace, and we'll be done. And then we'll take a little break and maybe think about tackling historic preservation in our spare time. So I think that's it for tonight. If I could get a motion to adjourn. Mr. Warner, anything you would add to this?
I think we got it.
Okay.
I would note that we still have a hand up from the public from Mr. Coho, who was here for the public hearing, but I don't know if he has any.
Let's,
Mr. Chairman, if it's a matter unrelated to the pending application, which of course we can't discuss outside of the hearing, it's the discretion of the chair.
Mr. Cohout, is there a question you have outside of the hearing that we were just postponed? Another question?
I apologize. I didn't realize I had my hand up still.
That's okay. Well, we look forward to seeing you on the 14th of October, and thank you for being here. Thanks everyone from the public who's still on for your patience, and we will solve this technical problem and be back in business on the 14th of October. All right, so we have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thanks,
Good
Bill.
night.
Meeting's
Be
adjourned.
well.
Thank you.